Emma sat in the far corner of the small cafe, her hands clenched tightly around the thin strap of her worn-out handbag. The scent of roasted coffee beans filled the air, blending with the chatter of customers and the soft notes of jazz playing from the cafe speakers. She should have been excited. After all, it was her first blind date in years, but instead, she felt like an imposter sitting among polished shoes, crisp blouses, and shiny accessories that seemed to belong to a world far removed from hers. Her eyes darted to the glass window, where rain droplets slid lazily down, and she thought, maybe I should leave before he arrives. She wasn't ready for this. How could she be? She hadn't even been able to afford a decent outfit for the evening. Her dress was simple, faded at the seams, and though clean, it couldn't compare to the elegance she knew she'd be measured against. She tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, trying to appear calm, though her heart raced with unease. The door chimed. Emma's breath hitched. A tall man walked in, shaking off his umbrella as the rain mist clung to his tailored navy blue suit. He scanned the cafe, his gaze finally landing on her. He smiled. Warm, approachable, not at all what she expected from a man whose very posture screamed success. He crossed the room with easy confidence and extended his hand. Hi. You must be Emma. I'm Daniel. His voice was steady, rich, the kind of voice that carried authority without arrogance. She shook his hand, her palms clammy, her mind racing with insecurities. He looked every bit like the type of man who belonged in glossy magazines, sharp jawline, perfectly styled hair, the faintest hint of an expensive cologne. He's way out of my league, she thought, lowering her gaze to avoid his eyes. Daniel sat across from her, and for a few moments, the silence was deafening. Emma fiddled with the hem of her sleeve, forcing herself to smile politely. A waiter appeared at the table with a notepad. What can I get you both? Emma froze. Her stomach churned, not from hunger but from humiliation. She had checked the menu earlier, hoping, praying, there would be something she could afford. But even the cheapest cup of coffee was beyond her means today. Her rent was overdue, her younger brother needed books for school, and every penny she earned from her 2 part-time jobs had already been stretched thin. She had told herself she would just sit and sip water, but now, under the waiter's expectant gaze, she felt cornered. Daniel glanced at her with curiosity, waiting for her to order. Emma's throat tightened. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into the folds of her chair. For a second, she considered pretending she wasn't hungry, or saying she wasn't in the mood for coffee, but the truth pressed against her lips until it spilled out in a whisper. I can't afford coffee right now. The words were barely audible, but the silence that followed made them echo louder than any shout. Her cheeks burned crimson, and she instantly regretted saying anything at all. She wished she had lied, made up some excuse, anything other than admitting her truth in front of this stranger, this man who clearly had never struggled for a simple cup of coffee in his life. The waiter's pen paused over the notepad. Daniel's gaze lingered on her, not with judgment, but with a softness she didn't expect. He leaned back in his chair, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. 2 coffees, he said calmly, his tone light and warm, as if nothing unusual had happened. Make them extra hot. The waiter scribbled down the order and walked away, leaving Emma blinking in confusion. She looked at Daniel, her mouth parting to explain, to protest, to say you don't have to, but he raised his hand. Slightly as if to stop her. Now, he said with a gentle grin, we both have one. No debts, no pressure. Just 2 people sharing a cup of coffee. Emma's eyes stung with unexpected tears. No one had ever handled her vulnerability with such grace before. Usually, whenever her struggles slipped into the open, people reacted with awkward pity, sharp judgment, or worse, mocking disdain. But Daniel's reaction was so simple, so kind, that it disarmed her completely. She tried to smile back, though her voice trembled when she said, "You didn't have to do that." "Of course I did," he replied easily, leaning forward slightly. "If we're going to sit here and talk, we need coffee. And besides," he added with a playful smirk, "I hear conversations flow better over something warm." Emma let out a shaky laugh, her tension loosening bit by bit. For the first time that evening, she didn't feel like she was about to be exposed as a fraud. She felt safe. The waiter returned a few minutes later, placing 2 steaming cups of coffee in front of them. The rich aroma filled the space between them, mingling with the quiet hum of conversation in the cafe. Daniel lifted his cup, gesturing toward her. "To blind dates," he said. Emma hesitated, then raised hers too. Their cups clinked softly, and she felt an unexpected warmth. Not from the coffee, but from the man across the table. She studied him carefully as he took his first sip. His demeanor was relaxed, unpretentious. Yes, his suit was tailored, his watch probably worth more than her rent, but his eyes held no arrogance. There was a steadiness in them, a kindness that unsettled her more than his wealth. "Tell me about yourself," he said, placing his cup down. "And don't give me the polished version. I'd like the real one." Emma froze for a moment. The real version of her life was messy. Late rent notices, juggling jobs, sleepless nights worrying about her younger brother's future. The polished version would be easier, but something about Daniel's gaze urged her toward honesty. She took a breath, her fingers warming against the cup. "The real version. Well, let's just say I almost didn't come tonight. I thought you'd take one look at me and wonder why you wasted your time." Daniel tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable but attentive. "And yet, here you are. Which tells me you're braver than you think." His words sank into her, quiet but powerful. For the first time in a long time, Emma didn't feel judged. She felt seen. As the rain continued to patter against the cafe window, Emma realized this wasn't the disastrous night she had feared. Somehow, in the span of a few minutes, Daniel had turned her shame into something lighter, something almost beautiful. And though she couldn't explain why, she felt a spark of hope flicker in her chest. The cafe had grown quieter as the evening wore on. The chatter of earlier customers had softened, leaving only the soft hum of the jazz tune and the occasional hiss of the espresso machine. Emma found herself leaning forward, her hands curled around the warm cup of coffee Daniel had ordered for her, as if it were an anchor keeping her steady in the storm of emotions she had been feeling. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him. Daniel was different. He wasn't pushing her to impress him, wasn't raising his brows at her worn dress or the way her voice wavered when she spoke. Instead, he was just there. Present. Listening. And that was something Emma wasn't used to. "I'm sorry if I made things awkward earlier," she said softly, breaking the silence. "I didn't mean to. Well, I didn't mean to put everything out there like that. About not being able to afford coffee." Daniel set his cup down gently, his eyes meeting hers. There was no pity there, only an unwavering calmness that made her feel as though her words mattered. "You know," he began, his voice steady but thoughtful, "people think money erases struggles. But it doesn't. It just changes what those struggles look like." Emma tilted her head, surprised. "What do you mean?" He leaned back, his fingers tapping lightly against the porcelain cup. "Everyone sees the suit, the car, the title, CEO. Those 3 letters make people assume I live in some perfect world. But they don't see the nights I spent pacing the floor, wondering how I was going to make it as a single dad. They don't see the mornings I had to leave my daughter crying at daycare because I had meetings I couldn't miss. They don't see the mistakes, The loneliness, the constant fear of failing her. Emma's lips parted slightly. You're a single dad. A small smile tugged at his lips as he nodded. Her name's Lily. She's 7 now. Smart, stubborn, and has this way of asking questions that make me rethink everything I thought I knew. His voice softened with pride. She's the reason I keep going. Everything I do for her. For a moment, Emma was silent. She hadn't expected him to reveal something so personal. She had pegged him as the kind of man who lived behind walls of wealth and status, but here he was, lowering them for her. It disarmed her in a way nothing else could. That must be hard, she murmured. Balancing everything. He chuckled, running a hand through his hair. Hard. It's exhausting. Some days I feel like I'm doing everything wrong. But then she'll hug me, or tell me she loves me, and it reminds me that maybe I'm not failing as badly as I think. Emma felt her chest tighten with a mixture of admiration and empathy. She's lucky to have you. Daniel's gaze softened. And I'd say your brother is lucky to have you. Her eyes widened. How? You mentioned him earlier, he said gently. When you were talking about why things have been difficult. You didn't say much, but I caught it. You're working 2 jobs to keep him in school, aren't you? Emma's throat tightened. She hadn't meant to share that, but somehow, it had slipped out in her nervous rambling. Yeah, she admitted quietly. He's 17. Brilliant. Honestly, he wants to be an engineer. I promised my parents before they passed that I'd take care of him, no matter what. So, I just do what I can. There it was again. That vulnerability, raw and unpolished. She braced herself for pity, but Daniel didn't look at her that way. Instead, his eyes reflected something deeper, respect. You know, he said after a pause, strength doesn't always look like climbing the corporate ladder or sitting in a boardroom. Sometimes it looks like showing up every single day when you don't have anything left to give. That's the kind of strength you have. Emma blinked rapidly, trying to keep her tears at bay. No one had ever framed her struggles that way. To most people, she was just another poor girl barely holding it together. But to him, she wasn't invisible. Why are you being so kind to me? She whispered, her voice cracking. Daniel smiled softly. Because I know what it feels like to hide parts of your story, afraid someone will judge you for them. And because I don't think you realize how remarkable you are. The words washed over her, filling the cracks in her heart she hadn't even known were still open. She stared at him, stunned by the sincerity in his eyes. For the next hour, their conversation flowed effortlessly. Emma found herself telling him about her childhood, her dreams that had been put on hold, her love for reading despite barely having time for it anymore. Daniel, in turn, shared stories about Lily, her obsession with painting, the time she had cut her own hair and proudly declared herself a stylist, the way she insisted on saying goodnight with a story every evening no matter how late he came home. They laughed together, the kind of laughter that felt unguarded, genuine. Emma felt lighter than she had in years. As the evening drew to a close, the cafe began dimming its lights, signaling that it was almost time to close. Emma looked at her empty coffee cup, then at Daniel, reluctant for the night to end. He noticed her hesitation and smiled knowingly. Can I walk you out? She nodded. They stepped outside into the cool night air. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the glow of the streetlights. Emma hugged her cardigan tighter around herself as they strolled slowly toward the bus stop. Daniel walked beside her, hands in his pockets, his steps measured to match hers. For a moment, silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was full, like the quiet after a song that lingers in the air. At the bus stop, Emma turned to him, unsure of what to say. She wanted to thank him, but the words felt inadequate. He beat her to it. Thank you, Emma. She blinked. Me. For what? For showing up. For being honest. For reminding me that sometimes, the most beautiful connections happen in the simplest of places. Her throat tightened again, but this time, she smiled. I should be the one thanking you. You made tonight different. Special. Daniel hesitated for a second, then pulled a small card from his wallet. He handed it to her, but his eyes held hers with gentle seriousness. This has my number. Not the business line, the personal one. If you ever need anything, even just someone to listen, call me. No expectations. Just call. Emma took the card, her fingers brushing against his. She nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. As the bus approached, Daniel gave her one last smile, the kind that lingered long after he turned to leave. Emma boarded, clutching the card like it was something precious, something fragile. As the city lights blurred past her window, she realized something profound. She had walked into that cafe feeling small, ashamed, invisible. But she was leaving with her head a little higher, her heart a little fuller. And though she didn't know what the future held, she knew this: she had shared more than just a cup of coffee that night. She had shared her soul. And in return, she had found hope.